Hello, Miss Stokes here, and in today's lesson we're going to look at the artist David Tress. Tress creates highly textured and collage landscapes, trying to capture the atmosphere and the energy of a landscape rather than the realism in it. Very similar to the work we looked at last week of Turner's, where he tries to capture the energy, and if you can see here comparing them, there is a similar quality to the work. The landscape becomes more abstract. So today we're going to do a copy of Tress's work, and this is the image I'm going to use. We're going to use lots of different collaging materials that you can find around the house. You could use the centre of a loo roll, because that's kind of nice thick cardboard. You can also use an old cereal box, which is also quite thick. An old envelope, it gives you a slightly different textured material. You'll need a pen and a glue stick, some newspaper, you can use your sketchbook paper, and also packaging from maybe an Amazon delivery or something, which is quite thick too. So to start, you will need an A5 piece of your sketchbook paper as your base. This works quite well because it's quite thick paper. So now you can start to collage the materials on top of your base. This is quite difficult because when you look at the work you're copying of Tress's, you kind of need to see past the paint and just see kind of his base textured layer. So really look closely at the image. One of the interesting things about Tress's work, he doesn't let the rectangle, the frame of the landscape hold him in. He really lets the paper go off the sides of the page, which makes his work more naturalistic, a bit more organic, like the landscape is. When using your different collaging paper, you can rip them and you can use scissors, but sometimes, interestingly, like here with newspaper, it will rip perfectly straight one direction, but won't rip straight another direction. That's quite interesting to know if you want to try and create nice straight horizon lines. So vary your kind of cutting and ripping techniques to kind of create the texture within what Tress has created. Because sometimes if you have a fence, you kind of want to keep that kind of nice and straight in the landscape. But if you've kind of got a more organic mountain that you want to create, you'd probably rip paper instead. Think about the layers in your collage, what becomes first, what's on top. It's really important that you kind of look at this because it gives a sense of depth in your landscape. So things that are in the foreground and things that are in the background. Try and create lots of different types of texture with your paper. So here I've initially done a blocky base for my landscape. Then on top there is a fence and lots of grass, and Tress uses very fine cut little strips of paper to give this kind of finer, more detailed texture upon the top. Consider the size and shape and length of your pieces of paper. Long, thin, lovely lengths will create lovely horizon lines. If you start to kind of put lots of tiny little bits of paper all over it, you'll lose a sense of kind of that lengthy, long line of the horizon. So really think about the shapes that you're trying to create with the paper that you're using. So I'm coming to the end of my collage layer, and I'm thinking about all the little details of the image now, just to get a real sense of the composition of what Tress has tried to create with his collaged layer. Now I'm going to start to think about adding colour to my collage, and I will use my watercolour set to do this. Remember, when using your watercolour set, as we did last week, you need to make sure that your colours are really vibrant. Tress's work is highly coloured and very, very vibrant and powerful. I don't want to see thin, translucent, pale colours. I want you to really try and capture the vibrancy and the shocking colours sometimes Tress uses. So initially I start to get a base layer down and start to map out where the most prominent colours are in my image. Don't worry about being too perfect. You're just trying to capture a sense of Tress's work. But his work is quite abstract, so I don't think people are going to notice if the slightest little colour isn't in the right place. But do try and get the general gist of the image. I gradually build up the layers in my painting, and as it builds, it becomes more detailed and more definite. Think about tone in your landscape. Where are the darkest areas and where are the lightest areas? One difficulty you have is that the white isn't very vibrant in your watercolour sets, or you might not have a white at all. So one way around that is not painting where the white areas are and leaving those as white as the page, but also here you can add little highlights with added extra bits of collage material. I found that worked quite well. So if there was a really vibrant white cloud in the sky or a really vibrant area of light, At the end, I could start to add kind of bits of white paper to bring that vibrancy back in to the image. I also use a pen and a pencil to work detail into my image. This can add lovely kind of textured marks, and it can also be really good at adding like grass and subtle areas of tone, particularly with the graphite. You can add really subtle areas of tone and texture. This piece of work is all about building up layers, from the collage layers to applying the paint layers. Spend time building the layers. It takes a lot to really look at Tress's work, as it's quite hard working from an abstract image. So sometimes give yourself time to go away and come back again, and you maybe may notice something that you didn't before. That's what I did when I was painting my work. So gradually here now I'm putting the final touches of paint, and you can see my paint's becoming a lot more vibrant, particularly those little red and orange flecks in the landscape. At home you might have some other white paint, maybe acrylic or gouache, which you could use to help add highlights to your painting at the end. You could also add some charcoal or chalk into your image. Tress used to use chalk to kind of add streaks into his landscape to give a sense of rain. I didn't use this in my image because I wanted to just use the basic materials that I think you'd have at home, from your watercolour set to a biro and a pencil. And I still think it creates a really effective textural landscape like Tress. But if you do have extra materials at home, feel free to add those if you would like. So now I'm adding my finishing touches, mostly using my pencil. This kind of defines it and adds the little streaks and stuff that Tress adds into his work. And I also add the most vibrant bits of colour that I want to add, so I add the blue streaks and maybe some little bits of orange. So this is my final outcome. I think it's captured a real sense of texture and light in the landscape from Tress's image. Hopefully you enjoy working in this way and you make a really good study of Tress's work.